Yes, hello, and welcome to Release the Creative, your favorite show about cognition, creativity, and this week, do you want to film a podcast?
And Happy New Year, eventually.
This week. It's, it's Monday now, and by the end of this year, it'll be 2021. Everyone keeps on saying, like, oh yeah, 2020 has been a dumpster fire. I can't wait till 2021. We have absolutely no information that suggests that this wasn't, like, the jumping off point.
Yeah, it's going to be, even with what we know now,
right?
It's like you're looking at the end of summer before it's like things are a little better. And that's with what we know now. There's still lots of unknowns.
No, and I have two different friends, both work in healthcare, that got part A of the vaccine this week. Mm-hmm. So we will see if they are zombies in a few weeks, or if they are superhumans or have grown a third leg, like whatever. Like we will see what part A of the vaccine does. I think they get part B second week of January.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. I remember a few months ago, I was kind of saying, we went into lockdown and school stopped in March. So what's the over under on a year? Like, are we going to be back to almost normal under a year, or are we going to be back to normal over a year? And I don't think there's any way we're anywhere near back to even sort of normal by the year mark.
I think everybody's going to be looking at the start of school next fall as the, like, all right, we're going to try to be normal right now. Like, not that it's going to be 100% normal,
right? But like that'll be
the water line for like, we're trying.
No, it's interesting. The 2020 has been a very interesting year well, first off, there's no one on the planet that 2020 hasn't been a break from reality. It's been very different. Lots of careers got put on hold. Lots of college careers got put on hold. Lots of big things. Everyone has had to do a lot of very, very, very fast adjustment. That's a hard word to say sometimes. And it's interesting, these kind of mass global events, of which there's been remarkably few in the history of forever, these global events that force kind of a cultural change. And we've seen a few over the course of the last year, like lots of things kind of changing on a cultural level. Any spring to mind for you?
You talking about like
really anything? I mean, masks are obviously one. Now we see masks as a kind of those are now part of the cultural consciousness. Even after next school year, I will imagine that we're going to see people wearing masks in grocery stores. Not the 90% we see now, but we will see people in public spaces wearing masks as just kind of part of the part of the culture.
Yeah, I see online all the time people post pictures of like the Super Bowl 3 years ago, and people will always make comments like, it's so weird to see so many people together, like it just looks weird. Right. And I do wonder how long that will take to get, like, there's a lot of friends I haven't seen, and it's like, cool, next summer I'll start seeing those friends, we'll hang out. But yeah, the idea of going to a movie theater and like I hope movie theaters survive and all that, but I think I'm gonna feel really weird going to a movie theater even after everybody's had the vaccine.
And you and I are kind of on different ends of this spectrum. I'm a hardcore extrovert. I'm a hardcore let's go out and do something. And even I have of course taken the virus very seriously, but I have gone out in public more. I mean, with a mask, everything. I'm not one of the people that's like completely hunkered down, because I would go insane in a very, 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 very real way. But I'm with you. I used to go see movies 3, 4, 5 times a week, and that's not made it. I don't know that I'm going to a dark room full of people coughing any time soon.
I've thought, when it's weird how things cycle. You and I grew up in the 80s and the early 90s. We had old people who grew up in the Depression. And like my kids don't know that anymore. Like those people aren't around. So like when we grew up, there would be, it's like, Aunt Ethel reuses or washes sandwich bags in the dishwasher.
My mother washed sandwich bags in the dishwasher.
Yeah, okay, so she's not the greatest example.
But she grew up in southern Colorado.
She got it from her parents. The point was the effects of the Depression were still very prevalent on our childhood.
Absolutely.
We knew lots of people who were either went through it or their parents went through it and they learned these lessons from their parents. So the idea of, they do X because they went through the Depression was a very common saying.
Absolutely.
And you don't hear that as much anymore.
No.
Our children or our grandchildren, it's like, why does Grandpa Kirk always put on a mask when he coughs? It's so it's like, oh, well, he lived through the COVID, and it's going to be a weird thing to like, our kids will be the ones, the last generation, like, oh yeah, I was there, and their kids will be like, it's an old timey thing.
No, and I mean, my whole life, even in the 80s and 90s, almost exclusively in airports, but seeing someone in a public setting wearing a mask was unusual, but not terrifying. You're like, oh, that person either has a medical condition or they are immunodivergent or they're weird.
No, the way it used to work is someone with a mask. Is it an Asian lady? Yep. Everything's good with the world. And like, it made sense. It's like, okay, cool.
I don't know why that's a true statement.
Well, they took it seriously. And like, I'm not like making fun of them. It was like, no, they took it seriously. And we were raised in a culture where we didn't. Yeah.
Is it an Asian lady? Do they look like they've been through chemo or radiation recently? Like there was people that were sick wore masks in public or who were really, I think that's not going to be true anymore. I think that there will be a startlingly large number, read 8% of people that in airports and bus terminals will now just fashion it up with a good old mask. And I'm kind of here for it, actually. I'm sort of okay with that being something that we've adopted as a culture.
As annoying as they are, there's a lot of benefits to people can't read your expressions.
So mine,
which is a good thing in my book.
This is the weirdest for me. What I super love is not having to pretend like I recognized you at the grocery store. Like if I see someone, I know exactly who they are, but I'm wearing a mask and so are they. So I can pretend like I don't. And I don't have to go say hi to the person that I don't want to talk to. I was like, and sometimes once or twice they'll be like, Kirk, is that? I'm like, oh, sorry, I didn't recognize you with the mask.
It has made me realize about myself that not people I know, but just like you're walking into a grocery store and someone's walking by you and like you make eye contact. I've realized that 95% of my communication with strangers is just smile, just like, hey, and like I do it. I still do. Well, no, I do it, but they can't tell. Like, so like they're coming in and I smile and then I walk by and I'm like, they just think I stared at them and then that's that. Like, there's some people in the world that say hello to people or like interact with, using their words. And apparently I'm not one of those people. And masks have taught me that.
So one of the biggest, if you were to make a list of top 10 crowd events of any given year, you mentioned one already, the Super Bowl, is a huge event. I don't know what the other of the top three, but the second in the top three would have to be New Year's Eve at Times Square.
I was going to say the real number busters are like Super Bowl. It's like, okay, it's one city though. The real number busters are where everybody gets together in their own cities, and New Year's counts as that because,
okay.
A lot of, sure, there's Times Square, but then, everybody goes to a party or they go to their town has like a little festival in the plaza.
That's true.
Or New Year's Eve might take the cake in terms of there's a million little, and then like 100 people gatherings.
Well, though, because, Thanksgiving, you get together with your 25 closest friends, family, and friends and family. Halloween, you get together with your kids' elementary school party of some way.
Halloween might be a strong contender too.
But the holiday / New Year's party are really the times that you get together with an insanely large number of people that you barely know.
Yeah, last Christmas, I went to some corporate event that my dad got invited to. He's like, come to this Christmas party.
Right.
And I was thinking about that this Christmas. I was like, yeah, last Christmas I went to a Christmas party and talked to like 50 strangers, and that didn't happen this year.
No, networking became very, very, very interesting. But so New Year's Eve this year, 4 days away, 5 days away, I'm going to be really interested to turn on, the Dick Clark's Rockin' Eve, which hasn't been Dick Clark's Rockin' Eve for, what is Ryan Seacrest going to do this week?
Yeah, I hadn't thought about New Year's Eve at all. Everything was a Christmas and Thanksgiving. It's like, well, don't visit all your cousins. Maybe just visit your parents. Like family house stuff. I haven't thought at all about New Year's Eve.
New York being what New York is as far as the ground zero of it, and how hard it was hit there, it'll be really interesting to see. I mean, there's no way they're doing anything. Are they going to do a closed off ball drop? Just no one in the streets?
New York having been hit so hard so early, like I could see other cities maybe, being like, oh, we're going to put hula hoops on everyone and you don't get closer than your hula, I don't know. I just can't.
For the record, I would be all about that event.
A Times Square where everyone's wearing like a hula hoop.
Hey, your hula hoop can't touch my hula hoop because then we're closer to there's no Venn diagramming here.
That's 6 feet. That's a cool idea, but like
I'm here for this.
I think New York is going to just be ultra cautious and like it's not. So yeah, I don't know. Are they just going to put? I'd be pretty cool with seeing like Ryan Seacrest out in the middle of Tom
with
Cruise,
a band,
Tom Cruise style. What's that movie?
Oh, you're thinking Vanilla Sky.
Vanilla Sky. Yes,
or Cillian Murphy 28 Days Later.
Let's Vanilla Sky Ryan Seacrest and just have him in an empty Times Square.
I love that we just turned Vanilla Sky into a verb. Let's Vanilla Sky Tom's Great Seacrest.
You can verb anything.
You can really verb anything. So I remember the first time I heard about the ball drop, I was like 8. And I came to my parents like, hey, did you hear that they're dropping a crystal chandelier ball like in Times Square at midnight? And they're like, yeah, they do that every year. I'm like, this is awesome. And my parents are like, it's really not. I'm like, no, this is so cool. It's like, can I stay up? Again, 8. It's like, can I stay up till and watch it drop? And my parents are like, sure. Like, knock yourself out, kid. And so I did. And everyone else went to bed. My house wasn't big partiers and we didn't drink. And so there was nothing to do. So I stayed up and I had popcorn and I was waiting and it kept showing, there's music and everything. It kept showing this big, beautiful crystal ball. And in my head, watching the ball drop was at like 1 second before it was going to drop and
just shatter.
And just shatter. And I was like, what an amazing, you christen ships by shattering champagne on the bow. You're going to bring in the new year by shattering a crystal ball. This to an 8-year-old makes sense. And just so we're clear, to a 38-year-old still makes more sense than what they actually do.
This could be our opportunity this year. If Times Square is empty and it's only Ryan Seacrest, we could drop
a ball on Ryan Seacrest.
Yeah, a little behind him, but there's a lot of room there now.
Sure.
That they could just shatter something in the street.
Because I remember thinking this is so cool. Like, and when it didn't happen, they're like 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, Happy New Year. Like that was dropping the ball. No, they dropped the ball on dropping the ball. Like, anyway, in the Aaron Sorkin classic Sports Night newsroom, they talk about the world's largest non-event, and that would be Times Square New Year's Eve. But it's the segue into the world's largest, not non-event, the New Year's resolution, which is to say the quickest thing you forget you ever said you were going to do. I used to work in gyms. I used to be a personal trainer for many years. And the worst time to be a personal trainer was the first 3 weeks of the year, because the place was slammed with people who had no intention of continuing to do, they had intention that we're never going to keep coming.
Actually going to do, yeah.
Have you ever done a New Year's resolution?
No, I don't really believe in New Year's resolutions because they imply I'm not already perfect.
Okay, I'm making that a clip and we're putting that on our website. Just like, that's just going to be a GIF that we rotate through, because that was perfect.
No, but no, in seriousness, I have never felt like pegging personal improvement to a date on the calendar. Like, that never made sense to me.
I agree with you. The only time I did was 2009. January 1st, 2009 is when I started lost 70 pounds, started running every day. And I really did. That's when I got my certifications and everything. And the only reason was I had decided to do it in October and then realized that starting to diet and get in shape right before Halloween, Thanksgiving, and Christmas was just stupid.
The deadly corridor.
I was like, beginning of October, I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm like, New Year's.
Yeah, I definitely see the value in attaching some sort of goal to some sort of event. But to me, it's never been, New Year's doesn't mean anything. It's like, it's always got to be something related to me. It's like, oh, I want to accomplish this before I go on summer vacation. Right, or I want to do this before,
I need to lose before the cruise,
before school starts. Okay. Or, like, it has to be pegged to some kind of event that like matters. And to me, yeah, it's like New Year's just doesn't. So
now to tie up all these conversations and kind of the bow and the point of the day of, do you want to make a podcast? Is that the pandemic saw a lot of new behaviors and people trying new things that they'd never been locked down with nothing to do before. Yeah. And they realized before that the internet, which had always been in their home, the internet, it's not just for cheap porn anymore. Like, there was more you could do, and people started podcast. Podcasts blew up over, including this one. Yeah, we've been talking about that one for years, but the lockdown is what gave us the time and the resources to do it.
This is a COVID podcast. Welcome.
One of our friends from Heartcast Media, Molly Ruland, she's amazing and awesome. And if ever you needed help producing your podcast, you should look up Heartcast Media. She's great.
Video us podcasts, Molly.
Yes, that. We've been talking to her about, different things, and she was telling me, an absurd number of podcasts never make it past the second, third, fourth episode. Like, you sit down, you record for a weekend, and then you have $500, $1,000, $1,500 worth of gear that you never see again.
This is in fact my second podcast in my life.
I didn't know that.
Didn't even know about this. Some of my improv friends from back in the day, Chris and Patrick.
Okay.
I believe it was Patrick's idea. He said, hey, let's make a podcast. Or what it was, one of his friends was starting kind of like a podcast network.
Okay.
And so his friend was like, hey, Patrick, you're a funny guy. Make a podcast. And so Patrick got Chris and me into it. And we went over to his apartment once a week we did 6 or 8 weeks.
Okay.
And we sent him off to the guy, and then it just kind of like life got in the way, and we're it's like now it's everything's so hyper social media that we're always like, what's our numbers? What's this? What's that? At that time, it was like we made a podcast, we sent it to his friend. It was just kind of like was it doing well? Did anybody listen? Like,
sure.
Like we kind of lost interest because we didn't really have that feedback.
Yeah, you definitely need. The interesting thing about like radio in general and podcasts is that feedback loop is really important. You need to know screaming into the ether is an exercise in futility. You're like, I had this podcast. You need some degree of feedback.
Some kind of feedback, yeah.
But what I think is interesting is not just the number of podcasts we've seen pop up over the last year, but the number of podcasts we've seen pop up over the last decade. It has become this remarkably. It's its own channel now. Like, it's its own thing.
Obviously, there was an uptick in COVID, but I'm never clear. I read and I feel like podcasts have had a couple of growth spurts. Right. Like I'm making these numbers up, but I feel that 2012 it doubled, and then 2016 it doubled again, but then in between it kind of plateaus. There's periods where I hear about this is the year of the podcast again. Yeah. And what's interesting is I have known about podcasts for, I don't know, as long as there's been podcasts, and I always felt them sort of. I was never a fan because it's like, man, if you want unverified data told by people not qualified to be saying it, you should be listening to a podcast. And every time I tried to tune into a podcast, that's what I found. I was like, no, I'm out. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of a small number of podcasts. Yeah. But it's like those specific ones. Like I try so many. Right. And it's listen to one episode of 100, and 1 out of 100 am I like, I'll listen to the second episode. And I'll say that I have same, except that I almost never got to the second episode of anyone. I was like, I'm just so out. I'm not in it. I recently, at the admonition of a friend of mine, started listening to Savage Love, Dan Savage's podcast, and I'm finding that I've listened to about 8 episodes of that now. And you know what? That's a run. I'm here for it. I do listen to the Micro right now because I just don't have the money to subscribe to the Magnum or the Time because it's twice as long. But the Micro is just fine at the moment. Just a quick note: there are some where it's like hour and a half episodes. That can be too long. Yeah. No, I'm enjoying his mini one at the moment, although I hear there's better content on the better one. Anyway, so this is a real question. Why are podcasts such a thing? Why? I mean, obviously there's the low point of entry. If you have a cell phone and a computer, you can make a podcast, but podcasts have been blowing up over the last decade and certainly over the last year. What is so appealing to having a podcast? One of my favorite film directors, this is a segue into the question, I promise. One of my favorite film directors of my youth was Kevin Smith. I loved the View Askew-averse. I have wanted to go to Jay and Silent Bob's Secret Stash for years, and the fact that I'm only 3 hours away and have never been is really jacked up. I am huge fans. And what's funny is that he talks about how he became a filmmaker because he loved the movie Slacker, and that he came home and said, I want to do this. I want to tell stories like that guy does. So everything from Clerks and everything on is because he loved movie. Slacker. I saw him speak at TwitchCon 2018, and I saw him talk about it. He's like, podcasts were not a thing in the 80s when that happened. But if they were, I wouldn't have become a filmmaker. I'd have become a podcaster, because the reason I made a movie was because I wanted to join in Slackerdom, which is why Clerks and Slacker have so many similarities, but that's another conversation. He's like, but if I could have just come home and started a conversation about it, but yeah, you had radio DJs on the Grease Man and Howard Stern, but yeah, I mean, back in the day, it was like, oh, well, you're either Steven Spielberg or you're a small, tiny, independent filmmaker. You're either a radio DJ or there wasn't a lower. You worked at weddings, wanting to be a DJ. That's what's so funny about the word DJ. If you wanted to be the Howard Stern radio disc jockey, there's that guy. And if you weren't that guy, you worked at weddings playing Puppy Love. Yeah, and I mean, even magazines had Time Magazine and independent New York City zines and and newsletters. There's the pro and the lesser version of everything except radio. There was pirate radio, but pirate radio has been always remarkably geographic. All radio is geographic, but it's that was more what do you call it? Public access television, right? It was not like how podcasts are. The podcast really needed the internet to. And it gave people a voice. It's developed its own channel, so much so that, my friend Lori who happens to be your wife, you know her. She's always we've met. Yeah, once or twice. She's always telling me that I need to listen to Dax Shepard's. I'll get on it. It'll happen. I will.
And then you're always telling me about Conan O'Brien's, which again, I'll listen to it eventually. It'll happen. I swear. It's interesting now that, these stars that have real, you can't see me with my air quotes right now, but these real platforms are electing to have home studio podcasts. And that's fascinating to me.
Yeah. I mean, some of that is COVID inspired, but it's actually changing what you just said, Conan O'Brien. I don't know if his podcast started. I think his podcast started pre-COVID.
It absolutely did.
It was an idea they had and they started doing it. Then COVID happened and he started doing his TV show from home. And he just actually recently announced that his TBS show he's ending. He's going to start a new TV show. The description of it to me sounds a heck of a lot like his podcast. It's basically he says this on the podcast all the time. He's like, it's so great that I have all this time to talk to you and I don't have to rush through a quick segment before a commercial.
Sure.
And he says that on the podcast. And so his new show is kind of based around that concept.
Sure.
So it's like the podcast was born out of necessity,
right?
But it has benefits that television doesn't allow.
And I want to approach this from two different angles. I want to approach this from the creator angle and from the audience angle, because in any time you're talking communication, in any communication, especially cognitive communication, which, remembering, guys, that's what the whole point of this show is. We've been kind of all over the place today, but cognitive communications is about A, what are you sending? And B, what are people wanting to receive? And whether that relationship is there. For as long as there's been late night, Johnny Carson, all the way through, the Jay Leno's, the Conan O'Brien's, the Seth Meyers, and everything in between, there's been a formula to it. There's been I'm going to do a monologue, then we're going to have a musical number, then we're going to have this, and we're going to have that, and then there's going to be, we're going to watch the clip, then we're going to talk about it, I'm going to ask you the same things.
Yeah.
And I saw a supercut of Craig Ferguson, who I love as a late night for the record. I watched him interview, I don't remember who it was. I really don't. He had interviewed this one person had been on his show like 12 times in 10 years for the different projects.
Yeah.
He asked them, again, this is not a crap on Craig Ferguson. This is the network. This was other than the clip they watched, they had the same conversation every single time.
Yeah.
I mean, and sometimes he would ask them a follow-up, like, oh, last time you were here, you were talking about surfing. Would you talk about surfing? And they're like, oh yeah, as I told you, I love surfing. And then they'd tell the same story. Like, it was so formulaic that it's part of our culture. It's part of our media culture. But I think somewhere along the way, through not just COVID, but through the last decade of the internet providing such variation and podcasts allowing such variation, we're now kind of really drawn to this buzzword authenticity, this real people being real. I was telling you the other day, I was stumbling upon Seth Meyers talking to John Mulaney on their real show, but because of COVID, there was no audience.
Yeah. I looked it up afterwards. I saw it. Yeah.
Like, And John Mulaney was sitting on the far side of the couch. They were not next to each other. And it was the most amazing. I don't watch late night because it is, I catch the formula because I've been trained to see the formula and I am averse to the formula. Even Conan, who I know you've always really loved, I am so averse to the formula that I don't have time for it.
Yeah, well, no. And I love Conan for his, the stuff they do out of the studio,
right.
Really, they take the cameras places, they go
right.
places. He goes all over the world. He goes to Spain, and
right.
like they go on trips and they make interesting, fun travel videos, right. And like that's awesome. And then they come back and they talk to Tom Hanks, and I love Tom Hanks, but I don't need to hear him say the same thing again and again.
It's the same thing. One of the only late nights that I watch is Jimmy Fallon because he's developed his own formula, but like it's a box of lies, and it's so weird. My whole point, backing off that tangent.
Segment.
That segment is Seth Meyers and John Mulaney, and it was the most non-late night thing. There was no laughter because there was no audience. There was no clip because there was nothing to promote. It was two guys that until that moment I had not realized had been co-workers on Saturday Night Live together, which of course they were. It had just never connected for me. And I sat and watched these two guys just have like a late night bro conversation. And I was like, I am so here for this. Because we as a culture have become so aware of that cognitive formula that has been used by Hollywood for so long that now the best way to penetrate through cognition is to do anything but the formula, which is strange. The best formula is to not do the formula, but there's a formula for that. But
yeah, well, I told you when you told me that story last week, I said that what you just described reminds me a lot of Jerry Seinfeld's Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee, which he's been doing for a couple of years.
Sure.
I think it started as like a YouTube thing, and
right.
then Netflix got it, and there's a couple of seasons worth, and it's the same kind of thing where it's just not as formulaic.
Right.
Like it very much is. If you watch it, like, oh, here's exactly the plan for this show.
Right.
But it allows the guests to kind of take the conversation in a different way, which to me, I think half of the episodes are amazing and half are just really not worth your time, which is a great show. It's like, it's 50. Like you let the guest kind of dictate what this episode's going to be like.
Right.
And for all I know, the ones I don't like, fans of that person probably love that episode. Right. You know, it's just they're not all hitting for me. But I really love what he's done in a way of shaking up the talk show format, which is what it sounds like happened in that thing you saw too.
But it's one of the things that I think is so interesting. It's about, I think that's why so many people are making their own podcast. There's so many people they're wanting to have the conversations that they're wanting to hear, without starting an entire conversation about the ethicality and the allegations of his past. Hugh Hefner, who just died a year or so ago, he talked about how he made Playboy magazine because he wanted a magazine that he wanted to read. So he's like, I'm just going to throw in all the things that I want, and that's what he did, because that didn't exist in that format at the time. And so now so many podcasts are popping up. It was like, man, I want to listen to a podcast about this, and people are just throwing themselves into it. So I guess the kind of takeaway today is, how do you make a formula that isn't formulaic, that is all the things you want it to be, that is still interesting more than at least half of the time?
Yeah.
How do you defy cognition while using the formula of cognition, and how do you find success while dodging all of these danger room laser beams? Real question. What do you think?
I like the quote of, well, I made the magazine that I wanted to. That's what all successful artists, pretty much across the board, they say, well, I made it for me and not for the audience. That's selling out. I made it for me. And that is both lovely and inspiring, and also
very rarely true.
Well, I was a bit of survivorship bias.
That's fair.
Is what it is I'm sure 1,000 guys started magazines with what they wanted to see. But it just so happened there's a million factors that go into what succeeds and what doesn't. Like literally a million factors. And I think that is an important component, but you got to realize it's like a million other things too.
So he doesn't know about Shout Him Out, and I'll actually text him later. So I am on TikTok, and I follow this guy named Dammit Jonah, @DammitJonah, and he's a guy that lives out in the Midwest, and he's the most accessibly interesting, quirky, weird, random dude. He kind of has a Jesus meets Obi-Wan Kenobi sort of vibe, like long hair, beard, just funny, quirky guy.
That makes no sense, because there is no difference between Jesus and Obi-Wan Kenobi.
But I was trying to pander to my geeks and my Christians at the same time. Thanks for calling me out on it. But the whole thing is that he did a stitch. If you're familiar with TikTok, he did a stitch recently of this one was like, let me teach you my formula for growing my channel. And he does this stitch, and he's like, look, I have over 100,000 followers and things like that. And I have friends that are objectively funnier than me. I have friends that are objectively more talented than me. I have friends that are this, that, and the other thing. It's luck. It's luck.
Yeah. I
got on one day and said the right thing at the right time, and it's luck. Stop trying to sell your system that is just false.
At the end of the day, it's luck. It is true that there's a lot of stepping stones. I always say that, you and I have always said this, that the cream rises to the top is not the formula for success.
Correct.
But it's the door you have to go through.
Correct.
If you look at something that's being created, 95% of it is not worth your time.
Which is why I listen to so few podcasts.
And the 5% of it, it takes very little effort to get in that fiber. We've discovered in everything we do, it's like you just need to put in a little bit of research and hard work. It takes hard work.
Being in the top 5% is super easy.
But it's not stupid hard to be the top 5% of everything. But once you're in that 5%, it's a hell of a lot of luck. And that's where but you have a shot. And so like that, what your question was, like, what do you do? Stay involved with what everyone else is doing. That's what I'm going to do. Your research, know what's out there already.
Right.
Try to put your own spin on it. Try to make sure you enjoy it.
Sure.
And the hard work is in the repetitiveness and the doing it again and again and again. Like anyone you love, you're like, oh, I love that guy's movie. Like he has 8 movies you've never even heard of.
Right.
That came first.
Right.
So you got to do all those things to have a shot at it. Then, no, I'm a big believer that like random luck is like a huge thing, and that anybody that succeeded and like all you have to do is what I did, that person is just talking bullshit.
And one of the things
they got lucky.
And one of the things that I've always heard and I really love is the statement, if I can do it, anyone can, is so not helpful, because it's not true. like everyone is talented, and the people that have been successful, like the number of successful, like, well, if I can do it, anyone can. All you've got to do is whatever follows that statement is going to be garbage.
Yeah.
So that's kind of it. Is, you know, this week it sounded like we were a little bit all over the place, but believe it or not, there was a formula today. We even planned out this episode. So for those of you, you know who I'm talking to right now, that think that we're all over the place. I had a listener call me and say, like, you're all over the place. Like, we're not though. Like, it's a plan to be all over the place.
We plant a bush and we dance around it. That's the formula.
It's how very Lord of the Flies. Okay, that wasn't planned. Anyway, right now, there's never been a time that it's been easier to get your voice out there and make the magazine you want to read. That right now, doing a blog with a mass distribution list is super simple, and getting your podcast out there super simple. Doing your YouTube show super simple, and there's so many people willing to sell you systems for, including us for the record, but that's not what I'm trying to do here. There's so many people that are willing to sell you systems for how to succeed in that. But really the trick is to ask more questions than you give answers, and be aware of, not necessarily follow the crowd, but be aware of what the crowd is doing. And making a podcast is great, or making a YouTube show is great, or making your zine, if God bless you. If
that must still be a thing.
That
right?
must be still a thing, right? There's never been an easier time to do it. But the trick in cognitive communications is making sure that you're not doing what everyone else is doing, because then no one will notice you. But make sure that what you're doing is recognizable to other people as what you're trying to do, because otherwise they won't know what to do with it. So it's about being like Jimmy Fallon, instantly recognizable as a late night show. But past that, not anything like the other late night shows. And Conan O'Brien's new show, he wants to do it like his podcast, which is longer conversational, more emotional conversations, because it doesn't feel like this cognitive trap that we've been caught in since Johnny Carson of lather, rinse, repeat. There's a lot of comfort in lather, rinse, repeat, but there's not a lot of success in it. You have to be spicy. I'm going to go with spicy. Yeah, so
that's the lesson of the day. Be spicy.
Be spicy.
All right. Well, that's it for 2020. Hopefully the world will exist next week, and you can come back and listen to our next episode.
Awesome.
Thanks for joining us here at Release the Creative. Kirk here would never say it to your face, but he thinks you should like and subscribe to us on YouTube.
And Jeff is far too shy to admit it, but he thinks you should subscribe to us on your favorite podcast reader.
Yeah? Well, you're the one who's always saying that everyone should give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
Why do you have to make everything so difficult?